Hello folks, welcome back. Minister of Agriculture John Steenhuisen has announced a blanket foot and mouth vaccination for South Africa's 7.2 million cattle. Minister Steenhuisen made the announcement at the African Farmers Association of South Africa conference outside Pretoria today, the 26th of November. The Department of Agriculture has resolved to implement a comprehensive strategy to vaccinate the entire national herd. This strategy aims to vaccinate South Africa's national herd systemically, beginning with the hardest hit provinces. The outbreak of foot and mouth disease was first reported back in May of 2025 and has since spread to other provinces. The story, however, received little serious attention from the Ministry of Agriculture or any action at the time. The outbreak led to a concerted containment and vaccination drive, with exports closed off and local meat prices rising sharply as a result of lost stocks. Unfortunately, South Africa could not produce the needed doses of vaccine and had to turn to neighboring Botswana for jabs to protect its herd. Why? According to Steenhuisen, despite the vaccination of over 930,000 head of cattle over the past 3 months, uncontrolled animal movement has been undermining containment efforts. Now notice the vaccination drive only occurred 5 months after the foot and mouth outbreak, allowing the feeble efforts to contain it without vaccination to fail miserably, gravely damaging the red meat industry. Meat reporting makes up as much as 50% of South Africa's agricultural revenue. Consequently, this is not a trivial matter, to say the least. Chief Economist of the Agricultural Business Chamber of Commerce, Windile Silobo, commented today about this issue at the conference. He said, currently South Africa is working to revive the Agricultural Research Council and the Undersport Biological Products to produce the essential vaccine, but the path must not end here. We have a national herd of around 7.2 million cattle. Still, this decision is courageous, as it ensures that South Africa protects its cattle herd and continues to focus on red meat exports. We must ensure that other private sector stakeholders are part of the vaccine production. Now, how is that going to be possible with racist laws in South Africa, in which you're forced to hand over equity to companies based on skin pigmentation? How are you going to do this? If it was going to be done under BE, one would imagine it would already be in place, but it's not. So now you want the private sector to pick up where the government has failed. Well, I agree the private sector should be producing vaccines, not the government. But why did the government lose its capacity to produce the vaccines in the first place? Steenhuisen said, we must be honest with the public and with our farming sector. This is a battle we are currently not winning, adding that it was time to up the ante. But the thing is, folks, I gave Minister Steenhuisen an opportunity to be honest with the public and get out in front of what I correctly predicted would be a major economic concern for South Africa's farmers. On June 25th, on July 1st, and on July 8th, I asked for interviews and was promised interviews each time. But despite those promises, Minister Steenhuisen never gave the interview. That was an opportunity in June to be transparent and open with the public and the farming sector. In June, when no other journalists were interested in asking about this question. They reported on the story, but none of them went to find out what was actually happening. Now, I'd hoped to address what had happened to South Africa's domestic vaccine production for foot and mouth, a problem that predated his appointment as agricultural minister. In many ways, that's a softball. Certainly would have been a contentious interview. He would have had a chance to blame his predecessors. But my intent was also to cover quarantine measures and projected losses, something that cattle ranchers need to know about months ago. Alas, as per the previous dozen or so times the minister has promised to give an interview, he did not. Now, we've been told that Deon George was sacked because he's aloof and incompetent. Aloof. Incompetent? Sounds a lot more like a different minister, no? Sadly, much of this could have been prevented with the Ministry of Agriculture focused on agriculture. Foot and mouth disease is an endemic problem across southern Africa. There's no excuse for this to have been allowed to metastasize across multiple provinces. When I lived in Botswana had a serious problem with cattle rustlers in the eastern portions of the country from Zimbabwe, going across the border and rustling cattle and stealing them. The Botswana police service would try to track these rustlers. If they caught them and the cattle already gotten across to Zimbabwe, they wouldn't let them come back because Zimbabwe has endemic foot and mouth, and they didn't want their herds harmed. The Ministry of Agriculture and cattle farmers should have a workable plan in place for the inevitable in South Africa. The South African government should have vaccine on hand at all times, and the country should have the ability to ramp up production overnight. But it lacks both of those things. If it has a plan for foot and mouth, it's not self-evident to the public. Do ranchers know about it? Do the farmers know? Do they have a plan in place? How is such a problem allowed to fester like this? May, June, July, August, September, October, November. 7 months that we're aware of an outbreak. Hundreds of head of cattle back in July reported by the media in July. So since the media's made a big deal about this in July, after I was on the story in June, in July 14th, the story started coming out and the government releases statistics about 270 cattle infected in 5 provinces in July, August, September, October, November, 4 months since then. And we've been told that they've had a vaccination drive for 3 months. So what happened for that 1 month? What has happened for the entire time? This is unacceptable. This is not acceptable. If, in fact, beef and meat make up 50% of South Africa's agricultural sector, which is critical to the economy, how can a Ministry of Agriculture, how can the government of South Africa allow such things to happen? Ask yourself this question. Ask yourself this question. What's behind this? It can't be some grand conspiracy theory to cause cattle farmers to go bankrupt. That's just self-defeating. Can't be that. So it must be incompetence. What else would it be? Why isn't there a national plan in place? And if there's a national plan in place, why wasn't it executed? Why aren't cattle preemptively vaccinated? Why does South Africa no longer have the ability to produce the necessary doses of vaccine for its herd? Why do you have a herd this large and you don't have a measure to stop it? Folks, these are questions that need to be answered. Unfortunately, the Minister of Agriculture doesn't avail himself for an interview. And so-called journalists in South Africa don't ask these hard questions. They just report what they're told. They don't ask the questions that need to be asked. It's not journalism. That's a bulletin board. If you simply report what people tell you, you're not a journalist. You're just a bulletin board. What say you, South Africa? Mzansi. Cheers.